What's going on, Digital Wildcatters? Welcome to another week of the Oil and Gas Startups Podcast. I got my man Todd here with Core Fueling today. Todd, what's going on, man? How are you doing?
Not much. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. We were talking before we got on the show, and sometimes I zone out a little bit because it's like I want to ask you these questions and about your background on the show, and so. I heard you talking about Mount Rainier and Seattle here a minute ago, and that kind of you're talking to Julie, and that kind of made my ears spring up because I used to live in Washington and spend a lot of time in Mount Rainier National Park, and so we'll have to dive into that in a little bit. But first, tell me a little bit about what Core Fueling is, just high level.
Sure,
40,000 foot view of what you guys do, and we'll dive into that and your background.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you I'll try to keep it brief and as uncomplicated as I can. We actually have two companies, and it's important to kind of talk about both of them. There's Core Fueling and then Manicore Fuels, and they're kind of sister companies, kind of common ownership between the two. Manicore actually got started a little bit before the pandemic, 2018, to provide diesel fuel to the oil and gas space in West Texas. Primarily for frac work. So historically, those pumps that they use to fracture wells were the work was done by pumps, high horsepower pumps that were diesel fueled. And after Hurricane Harvey, there was a major dislocation in the market for diesel fuel out there.
Yeah.
And some of my colleagues who got there before I did saw an opportunity to come in there and provide another company that could provide those fueling services. And so for the first year or so of Manicore, it was just delivering diesel fuel to the well site. Not terribly complicated or interesting. But after about a year or so, those same customers came back and asked for automation. And that's simply, in the old days of oil and gas work, you would show up with a bobtail fuel truck, which is one of those shorter, tank trucks that a guy would jump out with a hose and fill up the pumps individually. And so you can imagine that makes sense when you only have a few pumps and you're doing a few frac stages, without getting too technical on how wells are drilled and completed. So 15 years ago, you might have a well that had 10 stages. You were there for half a day, then gone. Yeah. Well, the wells now that are, have multiple laterals off of a pad might have 500 stages of frac work. Yeah. So every time you're down to refuel, that's time,
and
wasted time. Yeah. You have whole crews just waiting. So these companies said there has to be a better way to continuously feed fuel into these pumps. And so that's where Core got started. We capitalized it separately. At the time, Manicore was actually a subsidiary of another company. And so, the company Core was formed really to kind of build these automation systems.
Okay.
So my colleagues had looked to originally rent systems from another party that didn't make sense economically. So the genesis of Core was basically to design and build these automated fueling systems and then lease them to the sister company. And so the best way I can explain it is, think of like a brain that sits on site that feeds diesel fuel continuously into the pumps.
Yeah.
And I kind of think of it like a thermostat where it's not to fill it up to the top, the tanks, or let them go to the bottom, but to kind of keep it consistent.
Just keep it steady.
Keep it steady, and we track the fuel rates in those pumps. So, that really was kind of 2019 timeframe. Cool. that happened. And obviously the pandemic struck. Our business, like most, were affected, but really within a handful of months, the business bounced back very rapidly. And by the end of 2020, we were kind of back up to pre-pandemic levels.
So you guys got into the game with diesel fuel delivery, then built out automation for it.
That's right.
These operations got more complex. Let's talk about your background real quick.
Sure.
Because earlier when you came in the office, we were just talking about how we knew some mutual guys over at Lime Rock and things of this nature. What was your background? It sounded like you were in finance.
That's right. Yeah, I started my career on Wall Street in leveraged finance in New York, and did that for a number of years and actually moved out to the West Coast to help a friend of mine with a couple of startups out there before going back to business school. And after getting my MBA, I wound up in Houston and spent about 18 years in the energy investment banking space.
What brought you to Houston?
Really the opportunity. If you want to do energy banking, it's kind of the center of the universe for that. So that, that's where the opportunities where I wanted to be. My wife was also in law school here, so it made it a lot easier to pick Houston as a place where I wanted to be. But yeah, spent almost 18 years in the space doing mergers and acquisitions, IPOs, other capital raises for primarily energy service companies. But I did E&P deals and a wide variety of other projects when I was a banker, and that's actually how I met my the guys at Core and Manicore. Was they were originally a client of mine, so. Okay. So I was really impressed with the team.
Yeah. So they were a client of yours through the bank, and then they come to you with this idea or thesis on the fuel delivery opportunity in the market.
It was already built by that point in time. So like I had met the one of the principals, kind of primary backers of the business, really at its infancy. Before it, kind of right when it was started, and we stayed in touch. That led to kind of doing some advisory work for them. And then by 2022, there was an opportunity for me to come on board as their CFO at that point in time. Cool. So I feel like I've known the team and the company almost since the beginning.
Yeah, since the inception.
But as an outsider at first, and then kind of stepping into the company directly.
Yeah. And so you guys see the need for a material step change in technology for the automation of fueling. And so let's talk about that, going from kind of pure play service business of delivering fuel to, providing a technological solution to solving a problem. What was... one, let me ask about the technology real quick. Was this something that you guys developed from the ground up, proprietary and automated system? Was it something that you took off the shelf, packaged it together? How was the technology developed?
Yeah, so it really was from the ground up, the way it was built. I think the kind of Mark I versions were like almost like one of those racing trailers, which had some slots in the side and reels with hoses that would come out of it. And in some ways, it was simple, but the real secret sauce is the kind of PLC, the software that runs the system. Yeah, the system itself, maybe the easiest way to explain it is, you have a frac tank or a big tank next to it that you can put 20,000 gallons of diesel fuel in. Yeah. And it pulls from that tank, and then it distributes it through a series of, I would kind of describe it as like a loop system that you would think about, distributing hot water in your house where you have a series of pipes. Kind of like a
boiler system. Yeah.
And then from that, there's a series of reels and hoses that go out individually that send fuel, some of our larger systems have 20 plus lines or reels.
Yeah. So laying this out kind of visual here is you got a large tank with, 20,000 gallons of fuel. And then it sounds like you have it hard lined around the location, and then you have reels that come off of that, or hoses that.
Yeah. So the frac tank sits right next to the system itself. It pulls from that, and then it distributes it through a series of additional hoses that are run directly to the frac pumps and their saddle tanks. Yeah. And we really, the trailer itself and the reels and the hoses, I mean, that's all stuff you buy from third parties. Yeah. The secret sauce is really the software.
It's in the software
and how it interacts with, we have a proprietary device that actually sits within the fuel tank, the frac pumps tanks, that wirelessly is transmitting basically the fluid levels.
Yeah, I was going to say is like, it sounds like you guys have some type of algorithm that says, hey, this is the fuel level in the individual pump, and it's always maintaining that kind of constant fuel level. And so where my mind is going is like, you probably had some combination of hardware, which it sounds like you do, and the sensor, and then on the software side, some type of algorithm that's saying, hey, pump one over here needs fuel feeding to it. And
absolutely, because some of the other systems out there, ironically, like what we didn't talk about, that it's not just the downtime. The reason automation is important is to eliminate that downtime. You're never stopping to refuel, but it's also safety. You're getting folks out of the hot zone where you have a bunch of this frac iron, high pressure. You're not having to bring guys in there to refuel. So you're really keeping people out of that area to step in there. And so you have the safety, the efficiency, but the system has a lot of fail safes. I mean, whether someone tries to drive off with a pump when it's still connected, it'll break. If the connection with that device is lost, it'll stop, right? That particular line will cut off, because what we don't want to have is spills.
Yeah.
And you can imagine when you have an automated system that's constantly feeding fuel, the
risk of spills goes up. If a guy filling up a tank by hand, he's going to know it's full stop, right? Yeah.
But if you're 2 a.m. and you have a system pumping, even if it's low pressure,
especially you can't tell you how many times I've seen water transfer flood location, filling up tanks, like people just don't pay attention. And by the time someone notices, you got 1,000 barrel or 1,000 gallons of fluid on the ground.
Exactly. So those were really a lot of the things that were factored into its design. And initially, like most things in the oil field, we had tons of data that we would bring to folks, and they didn't know what to do with it. I mean, you'd have guys that say, that's great, thanks, but just make sure you get the fuel to the equipment. And but the real value in that data is we can show folks if pump 5 is consuming more fuel than the other pumps, that probably indicates that pump's running harder. It's not running as efficiently. So there's an issue, potential mechanical issue or failure with that.
Yeah, that's interesting. You can start kind of backing into diagnostics of equipment based off of data from your system. That's interesting.
And it's not, not to use a core component of our system that's why people are necessarily using it, but the fact that you can see that. And then even more interesting, you can start to look, if you're an operator with multiple fleets, you can see if one of your managers is using 5% less fuel than another one. Like how are they doing their jobs? Like because the fuel costs are significant, right? I mean,
it's one of the major inputs to the
600,000-700,000, 800,000 gallons in a month of diesel just on one job. And so if you have someone that can save 5 or 10% of that cost, it's meaningful.
Yeah, no, it's that's sort of things like get interesting for me is like how you can, get maintenance data on equipment to see, which pumps aren't running efficiently. If you're an operator, comparing fleet versus fleet. And so that's like not something that, I started fracking 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was your little, bobtail tanker truck coming out and just that dude manually filling. And it's like there was no opportunity to get any type of insight or data through that. Right. And so
it was ancillary. I mean, and that's why just the industry's changed a lot, because, those early jobs, there was a little bit of fuel, a little bit of sand, a little bit of water, right, that you needed. And now it's become such a logistics play just to get all that stuff there. And, we'd like to think our system that we're not going to be the bottleneck or the problem on the fueling side. I mean, more often than not now it's the wire line or sand or water. I mean, but it's not the fuel side.
Just blame it out on.
And the data that we're collecting, it's become even more important because, something we've done within the last 3 years is to add compressed natural gas as a fuel source now. And you really need that. We're one of the few folks that supplies everything, the diesel, the automation, and the compressed natural gas. And so we can show folks the displacement, right, that they're getting. you were using 600,000 gallons of diesel a month. Now you're using 200, and you're displacing it with the gas. And unless you kind of have the data, all that data, it's hard to kind of definitively show somebody.
It's hard to articulate that
the
and actually show it.
Between the two.
Yeah. Which kind of leads me in my next question, which is about E-Fracs and like how y'all think about building this business is based on fueling with kind of the rise of E-Fracs. And obviously diesel is still heavily used, but how you guys, this is like more a question from you guys operating the business. I'm an entrepreneur. And so I think about these things is like, how do y'all think about shifts in the market and that shift to E-Frac? And, you just alluded to, you guys do CNG, compressed natural gas. And so, how do you think about shifting market while, building, this company?
Sure. So we like to think every few years. So I noted that we started off just delivering diesel through our sister company and then added automation. And within another year or two, we had folks asking about compressed natural gas. And so we started doing the homework on that and looked and saw the trends of not just E-Fracs, but dual fuel, DGB or dynamic gas blended pumps that can either use diesel or natural gas, or in some cases propane. So we saw the trend.
Is that common right now?
Oh yeah.
These dynamic fuel.
So the DGB pumps, kind of using your question, we think maybe 10 to 15% of the market now are E-Fracs, which are typically running off of gas turbines on site. We believe more than half the market now is some form of dual fuel pumps. So they run on combination of diesel and natural gas, and then the remainder would be the more traditional diesel pumps. But there's no question that the Halliburtons, ProPetros of the world, et cetera, are upgrading their fleets either to E-Fracs or to dual fuel pumps, and so the dual fuel is we anticipate it's going to be the majority of the market for the next few years. Yeah. It's relatively cheaper to upgrade those pumps. An E-fleet, if you're including the cost of a turbine and the pumps, it's tens of millions of dollars for each one of those.
Yeah, a lot of CapEx.
And over time you'll see more of that. But in the interim, if you need to swap out 4 or 5, 6 pumps, you'll do the dual fuel. Yeah. And so we saw those trends and saw that benefit. And frankly, we also believe, we do believe in the environmental impact of use compressed natural gas, 30 to 40%, less CO2, SOx, NOx emissions. It's better. And on a diesel gallon equivalent basis, it's cheaper. Yeah. Than diesel is. So it's a no-brainer, right? For
CNG,
a company.
T-Boone is always preaching this. Clinton was, I think that the idea of like electric semi-trucks is stupid. And it's like, why are we not going to compress natural gas on these or dual fuel on these? And so I'm right there with you. It just makes so much sense. On the CNG side from y'all's service, what does that look like? How are you guys, how do you provide the CNG? Are a lot of these fracs running off of fuel gas that's being compressed? Or are you guys hauling in the CNG? Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah. So our focus is so I'm glad you brought it up. Right now, you do really have 2 solutions, which is, we call ours like a virtual pipeline. So we actually compress the gas. We have facilities where you take pipeline grade gas that's already been cleaned up, and then we compress it to about 4,000 PSI. And then we have specialized trailers which haul that gas to the site. And when you're on site, you then have to decompress the gas, and that requires another piece of equipment, which we've actually built our own systems.
So you actually you have to decompress it.
Yeah, you can't feed it into the equipment at 4,000 PSI or a turbine. That's just too high pressure. Yeah. So typically you're reducing the pressure on site to maybe 500 PSI.
Got you. Yeah.
And,
so compressing it at high PSI just for density purposes of transportation, and then
that's correct.
Decompress it.
Then you decompress it on site, and depending on what's on site, we also have distribution units, which are similar to our automation system with a bunch of reels and hoses to distribute it once you get on site. And so where we had some really significant advantages, maybe over some kind of a newer startup that just does CNG, we had the diesel business and those customers. So you obviously had an entry point, but we also had the logistics. We're running a bunch of trucks already with diesel, and a lot of this is a logistics play.
Yeah.
You're compressing gas, you're transporting it.
Yeah.
You're picking up an empty trailer on site. So it's a cycle of moving assets around at any given time. And, so we had the trucks, the dispatch, the drivers.
Already had all the infrastructure.
In place to do that, as well as the customer base that's looking to add the CNG. Yeah. So that made it a very natural or organic, kind of expansion area for us. But what's interesting is you do have folks trying to use field gas, which in a perfect world, everybody would try to use field gas. But the problem is you need enough production in the area that you're producing the volumes. Even the quality is not so much an issue, because these turbines in particular can burn just about anything, right? A bunch of junk in the gas. The problem is the pressure. So if there's big fluctuations in the pressure, you get, I'm not an engineer, but cavitation, you could damage like a $20 million turbine.
Yeah.
And so ironically, what we've seen is even when they're trying to use field gas, we may be called in to have a trailer of CNG on standby just in case the pressure drops or there's a problem.
To keep it.
To keep the system there. But again, we're not in the field gas space, at least as of today, but there's a lot of ancillary equipment you need for that to potentially scrub the gas, clean it, keep the pressure at a certain level.
Yeah.
And because there's not a foolproof solution for that, I think a lot of the engineers, company guys, they like to have the backup there just in case.
It's nice to have. Yeah. So when you guys are hauling the CNG, how do y'all, cause it's kind of similar to a frac sand mine, essentially. You got to find locations that are centrally located, where you can do the compression, and then, have it within kind of some vicinity of the locations that you're serving. So, which is a tough logistics play. I mean, that's what you said. It's all logistics. How do you guys, when y'all are doing the compression, are you just, buying gas off of midstream company, off a pipeline and, doing it there on site? Yeah. How does that work?
Yeah. So we're sited right next to, we have two different facilities. One is a little bit north of Midland. Another is quite a bit further west, not too far from New Mexico border. Yeah. And they were strategically put there for the very reasons you mentioned, which is it's a long way to haul gas from Midland out to, southeastern New Mexico. But we sited our facilities right next to gas plants, literally right, kind of on the fence line to those plants. And so, we have a pipe coming in directly from those facilities that we can compress the gas from. And, we looked carefully at those locations. We have a very good, vendor, and on the midstream side that works with us.
Yeah.
And, because we want to make sure there's not a problem with the volumes that, they can handle what we need to pull.
Yeah, that's what I was saying is
Yeah. And there's no way. I mean, we're maybe 10% of the volume that those plants are running.
Yeah.
There's a ton of gas in West Texas. Yeah. So we're nowhere close to, they would happily sell us every MMBTU that they have.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we don't have a problem with supply. I think that the locations are important. And as you said, as we continue to grow, we'll look to expand and potentially add more of these plants in compression. I mean, we have a lot of space at each one of these facilities to add we have 7 compressors at the moment, and we can easily add another 4 or 5 compressors to each site.
No, that's super interesting to me. I mean, E-Fracs have been a big topic around here lately. I've done videos with Liberty and ST9 on their E-Frac system. ProFrac's a big investor of ours. I talk to them about this all the time. Sam Sledge over at Pro Petro, I talk to him a lot. And so it's cool to see the changing dynamics in frac over the last 10 to 15 years, and appreciate the statistics you gave on, what the market's made up of E-Fracs and dual fuels. And, the one comment that you made that kind of stood out to me, it wasn't even a comment, it was a thought of yours, but essentially what you guys said is like, we went from fuel delivery to 2 years later to automation to 2 years later, compressed natural gas. I mean, we have a neon sign out here in the hallway that says evolve or die. And that's what you guys are doing. It's like, there's new opportunities in the market, and we're just staying fluid with the market and the needs that it has, and whatever aligns with y'all's business and you can leverage your strengths for, you guys are attacking those opportunities.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think we like to say, every, maybe 18 months to 2 years, there's another, area to look at. And, to date, we've been very oil and gas centric, which that's our backgrounds. We know that space, and we think there's a ton of opportunity. I think in particular with CNG, there's tailwinds behind that space that will continue to make inroads for frac related work. But there's also huge opportunities outside of oil and gas. You mentioned tractors like fleet fuel for CNG. It's certainly not just oil and gas. I mean, you have, UPS, FedEx, Frito-Lay. I mean, you pick a company that's running tractors. They love to find ways to displace diesel in their tractors. Our own tractors actually can run on CNG too.
Nice.
And so we're trying to practice what we preach and use that as a fuel.
That's sick, because you guys are producing the CNG, and so they fuel up right there on
so there's
on site.
Economically, it makes a lot of sense to look at those areas, but data centers, a lot of places that historically used diesel generators or backups, there's a big opportunity for compressed natural gas in these areas. And so we're evaluating all these spots. I mean, I still think there's a huge amount of runway just in the oil and gas segment, but we're certainly not blind to other sectors. I mean, we saw the freeze in Houston a few years ago, and I even like backup power plants that could need some CNG on site. For those
that's
plants.
Actually good thought. Actually, I think it was Will Franklin that brought this up from Lime Rock. We were just talking about Will before we got on here. If Will's listening to this, we were talking all kinds of shit about you, man. That's fine. We weren't talking bad about you, Will. But I think it was Will that brought it up on Twitter, talking about how everyone's getting backup generators at their house in Houston, and does the gas pipeline infrastructure, the distribution network, support all of that demand in terms of, does it have the pressure that it needs to feed all these gen sets at these homes? And so just like really interesting dynamics across the board when it comes to gas distribution and needing CNG. So I mean, it's just like opportunity galore out there. So
we think so. I mean, we are, I like to think of myself like as all of the above, like energy advocate. And so I never like to look at zero sum game. Like when I look at alternative energy, I really think, not just the US, but the planet needs every source of energy we can get. There's no way to support, 8 billion people on the planet with the needs we have to just say we're just going to use one
and
or
escalating needs
and escalating needs. Yeah. And in fact, there were some recent articles about this. They're having to extend, coal power plants, retirement dates, because there's no way they can make up for the lack of power if they took those plants offline. And so we really look, gas, it's obviously still a hydrocarbon, but it's a cleaner one. And if and until we have a better, energy source, it makes a lot of sense. Where we can transition, it's not going to be the perfect solution.
Yeah.
But we think it makes a lot of sense in a few of these applications. And so, yeah, we're excited to continue to help folks,
Awesome,
with
man.
that journey.
So, all right, Todd, if we have any E&P operators, frac fleets listening, and they want to find out information on you guys, where can they find you? What's your website?
So yeah, the Core Fueling .com is probably the best one to reach out to, in terms of learning about the technology.
Cool.
And kind of you can find links to our sister company Manicore Fuels as well. But that's one of the best places to go. And yeah, I mean, I'll put in a plug for us. I mean, we do think that we like to think that we're white glove service. So, and as I mentioned before, we're one of the few operators that can supply everything, a one-stop shop for diesel automation, CNG, and related services. And it is a unique combination that not everyone can package together.
Yeah.
And as you can appreciate, being in and around the oil field, it's just different, right? Even large operators or fueling companies don't necessarily like the oil field because you're driving on lease roads and, it's 24/7 business where, it's not like construction, or Monday through Friday. I mean, it's a, 24/7, I'll call it 364, maybe Christmas Day people have off, but pretty much every day, the rest of the year, they're working and it's running. And so, not everybody likes that, it's not, we tell our folks it's not easy work. It's hard, dirty work. And, but it's one that I think, if you can do what you say you're going to do on time and, then people appreciate that. Yeah,
absolutely. It's my favorite thing about the industry. So, all right, we will drop a link to your website in the show notes. So if you're listening and you want to check it out, hit that link and go learn about the technology. Reach out to Todd and team here. Todd, appreciate you being on the show today, man.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yep. All right, guys, we will catch you on the next episode.